What's good, everyone? This your main correspondent, Alan Taylor, and I'm back in the broadcast room. And this is what we at here. So we got a good one from Anton Daniels, you know what I'm saying, after our show. And he had Myron Gaines on there, and they were actually talking about the situation with, Israel and Iran. And Myron Gaines, just a little background here. Myron Gaines, ex-FBI agent, he's kind of tied in with all these things that are going on, information and stuff. So it's I want to play this. I definitely think we need to listen to it because at the end of the day, though, Myron shot some good points out there. It was a lot of good questions that got asked and things like that, things that need to be known and, well, questions that need to be asked so we can know information that need to be known. So we're going to go here now and we're going to check this out. Quarters, nickels, and dimes, people.
But the long story short is, Trump is trying to get a Nobel Peace Prize here. And realistically speaking, though he is getting a ceasefire brokered, it's not going to end the conflict at all. Anyone that understands how long this conflict's been going on, we're talking about, 3 to 4 decades now at this point since the Iranian Revolution, understands that this is just a temporary ceasefire until, both parties can kind of replenish themselves and engage in warfare again. And the big reason why is because Israel miscalculated Iran's ability to destroy them. And what I mean by this is Iran has a very sophisticated ballistic missile program. Israel does have, competent air defense with the Sling and the Iron Dome and the Arrow. But the problem is that for every missile that Israel needs to shoot to intercept an Iranian missile coming in, it costs them significantly more money to defend themselves than it costs for Iran to attack them. So in the battle of attrition, had it went longer, we're talking about Tel Aviv and Haifa getting completely leveled and destroyed. And, it's interesting because Western media didn't really document the damage that was done in Tel Aviv or in Haifa. But the Iranians absolutely did do a significant amount of damage. I mean, they were shooting hypersonic missiles over there, which can't be stopped by these air defense. They did quite a bit of damage. But the thing is that a lot of people don't know this. There was a blackout thing put in place by the Israeli government where the press could not take video or pictures of the damage because that would allow the Iranians to get more precise coordinates so they can be more accurate with their next attack. So Israel had like a big censorship program that they were pushing where they didn't want the journalists and the media to publish. Obviously, video still got out there, etc., but they were suppressing it. Now, with that said, I do want to say also that Israel did a very good job of damaging Iran's capability to defend themselves as well. They ran a Mossad operation behind enemy lines. They were able to go ahead and destroy a good amount of their air defense, jam radars, launch drone attacks. So they did a significant amount of damage to Iran as well. But if we were, the longer the battle would have played out in that mode where it was Israeli airstrikes followed by Iranian missiles towards Israel, Israel would have lost that fight because it cost them significantly more money to defend themselves than it cost Iran to attack them.
Man, this is wild right here. And this is great knowledge for everybody to know. Israel is truly, definitely, at this point, that means Israel is truly dependent on America to actually have their back completely. And this is where we at here. Now, for some reason, like throughout the decades, we've been having Israel's back tremendously, and things like that. And it's been a lot that's been going on over in the Middle East. You know what I'm saying? They've been fighting for forever. I definitely understand where Myron was coming from with that situation. Yeah, Israel and Iran, all them places in the Middle East, they've been fighting for forever. And it just is what it is at this point, and it's at a tragic situation to where, at this point right now in America, we have so many issues over here that we need to deal with, and we need to restructure our own society. It's roads that need to be rebuilt, all types of things. And we just don't really have the time to fight everybody else's fight.
So that's kind of the gist of why the ceasefire was brokered. And then the other thing too, also, I think that's important is like this entire conflict was because of the nuclear program that Iran has. There's there's credible info out there that Iran moved a lot of the critical infrastructure when it comes to enriching uranium to 90% and getting the weapon well before the United States attacked them. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if Iran didn't have other facilities or they didn't have a nuclear program somewhere else, maybe even in another foreign country ally where they're running their program. So, a lot of this was smoke and mirrors. A lot of this was, show of force, etc. But there's no way that the Iranians didn't move their stuff out, and assuming they did, let's assume best case scenario that the Americans and Israelis did a good job and they destroyed their nuclear infrastructure. It doesn't matter. The regime's not going to change. They have the capability to remake their nuclear program because they've mastered the uranium centrifuge cycle, and they know how to enrich uranium and get a warhead. So they can still do it. It might take them a year or two, but unless they remove the regime, which is what Israel really wants to do, they're not going to, it's just going to be a temporary ceasefire.
Dang.
So you don't think that they're actually going to have a long-term peace deal that is brokered as a result of them getting a ceasefire that's in place right now?
No way. And the reason for that is because Israel wants a regime change. Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis will stop at nothing to get rid of the Ayatollah and try to topple the government. Now, what they were hoping when they did their operation 2 weeks ago was that they would cripple the Iranian infrastructure, the higher ups, make them panic, and then that would create the opportunity for the separatist groups within Iran to overthrow the government. But what actually happened was it backfired. The Iranian people got behind the Iranian government because even though a lot of them don't like the Iranian regime, they hate Israel more. So Israel's attempt to, divide the civilian population actually backfired because, keep in mind that when they got attacked while in the middle of diplomacy with the United States. And the attack was a sneak attack, and it was obviously very severe. So Iran took that.
I could definitely understand that. Yes. And see, this is what everybody's escaping on the fact, because Trump did what he did, stuff like that. Israel pushed the button first. Israel didn't sit down with Trump and stuff like that and, ask permission basically to make that move. It was already negotiations in place to not even have to fire any missiles. And see, this is the thing right here. Israel is so fucking gun-ho and things like that. So they just, on that side of the world, they always been trying to, create wars and things like that. That's the reason why back in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, if you're old enough, you remember they always used to scream peace in the Middle East and all that type of stuff. That's the reason why they used to scream that. It was always something going on in the Middle East. That's always been a war zone for thousands upon thousands of years. That's always been a war zone on this planet. It's been a hotbed of war and terrorism in that particular region. It's always been that way for thousands of years. And, we're at this point now to where, we've been having Israel's back definitely since the early 50s and stuff like that, with whatever, a lot of deep political situations and stuff like that. Israel is invested over here. We've invested in Israel, other little things. It's crazy, but this is where we're at right now. And, Israel pushed the button without really, really caring, because they want what they want.
That is a very big attack against their national security. And since they were attacked first, the people rallied behind the government to defend themselves. And that is why people took to the streets after Iran was attacked and said, we need a retaliation towards Israel. And they did it within 18 hours and they hit them pretty hard. Obviously, the media covered that, but both parties did a significant amount of damage to each other, for sure.
What do you think the long-term result is, if you had to guess, based off of what you see happening right now?
Okay, sure. So this is what's going to happen. On the Iranian side, they're going to work even harder to get a nuclear program. And the reason why is because having a nuclear bomb is going to be the only way that they could deter Israel and the United States from trying to effectuate a regime change. You look at North Korea, for example. They have a nuclear bomb, though they're enemies. Since they have a nuclear bomb, we can't really do anything to them because of mutually assured destruction, right? So I predict that the Iranians are going to work towards getting a nuclear bomb even more so now. Diplomacy, I think, is pretty much finished. Anything that does happen from a diplomacy angle is going to be feigning just to buy more time. And I think with the Israelis, they're going to, heavily leverage and lean on their intelligence assets like Mossad, Oman, etc., to try to impose a regime change from within. But I don't see that as successful because, to be able to do that, they're going to need to get boots on the ground. And we already know what happened with Iraq War, V2 in 2003. So
technically, for Israel to try to put boots on the ground, things like that, that's going to cause another huge problem. They're putting spies in place, all this other type of stuff. That's going to be a huge problem. And see, like Israel, and I kind of see where Myron coming from, the way he's explaining the situation, and I get it. You know, so Israel is really gun-ho to get a regime change in Iran. But the thing of this is yes, you know what I'm saying, Iran has come up with, you know what I'm saying, you know, technically a little bit better technology than what Israel is able to do and things like that. Israel doesn't have the funds to really, you know, defend themselves. And this is crazy right here. And they need to, you know, Israel needs to sit down to a degree. I can see why Trump got mad with the situation, you know what I'm saying, with, you know, between Israel and Iran. And be honest with you, though, low key, Trump was a little bit more madder with Israel than he was with Iran. If you pay attention to the shit now, pay attention to what Trump said. I did my broadcast on that situation. Go back and watch it. It's on my channel. You know what I'm saying? Trump was a little bit more madder with Israel than he was with Iran, because Israel, after they had the ceasefire put in place, Israel kind of just, you know what I'm saying, just went on and just was going to go head on and do. It's like, man, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing?
So the Israelis want a regime change, and they're going to try to leverage their intelligence agencies to do so. You know, they got Mossad operatives already calling people in the Iranian Guard at the high level saying, we're going to kill you if you don't, defect with the Iranian government, etc. So we'll see what happens. But that's what I predict the next two, what each party is going to do in the next few months, given the ceasefire.
What would you grade Trump as far as his job in office as of right now for the 6 months that he's been in for a second term?
The foreign policy has been bad. I'll be honest. You know, I can admit that I voted for Trump, and a big reason why I voted for him was, you know, I didn't want any new wars. But obviously the Zionist lobby is too powerful in America, and they push them towards this conflict. You know, anyone that tells you otherwise is just lying. And that's the problem. A lot of these political commentators on the conservative side, they're owned by the Zionist lobby. They run the media, whatever. We're on YouTube, so I'll keep it there. But, you know, when it comes to the foreign policy, you know, so he didn't negotiate the end of the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, right? And this is why he struck that mineral deal with Zelensky, because he understood that we're spending a ridiculous amount of money supporting Ukraine when they're losing. They've lost like 1 million soldiers now at this point. So he's like, you know what? If we're going to continue to support you guys, we need to get some of the revenue from the minerals. So that's why they kind of struck that deal. We're still giving them aid because he doesn't see, you know, a conclusion to the situation within the next few years. That's why I think he brokered that mineral.
That's a longer term deal. That's hoping that we recoup, assuming that we then at some point actually end the war with Russia, right?
Absolutely. Yep. It's exactly, that's precisely what it is. It's to recoup the money that's lost, so that while we continue to aid them, we don't go in the hole as bad. I guess Trump kind of underestimated how bad the situation was, thinking that he can broker peace, saying I can do it in 24 hours. You know, it's you know, Russia's winning the conflict. So the United States and Ukraine has to make a lot of concessions, and Zelensky is pretty delusional with some of his demands with Russia. And then as far as, you know, this conflict in Ukraine, I would argue that brought us back, this conflict with Iran, that brought us back a step, because, you know, Iran and Russia are allies, and this is going to, you know, make it even harder for peace talks with Ukraine and Russia. So I think him even being involved with a limited sense with just bombing the nuclear sites, I still think that was a bad move towards diplomacy, not just on the Iranian front with the Middle East, but it also did set us back a bit with the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, because right after this conflict happened, the foreign minister of Iran actually met with President Putin to discuss strategy. And whenever they say strategy, that means military, nuclear bombs, and intelligence agencies every single time.
That makes perfect sense. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is at this point, you know, because definitely on that side of the planet, you know, they're going to stick with each other. And I get that. I'm not trying to negate that, because they're on that side of the planet with each other. And it's just life. But the thing of this is that America needs to understand that where Israel is at, and also to, you know, of America's other allies are nowhere to be found in this situation. So yeah, it's crazy, and I get it. You know, at the same time though too, you know, America does have a tremendous amount of military might, but with this situation right here, like Myron just said, with, you know, Iran being in cahoots with Russia, and then Russia still trying to get the proper situation that they want with Ukraine, man, hold on. It's a lot going on here. Proxy wars, whatever you want to call them, things like that. This is a whole situation that shouldn't be in play. We have too much going on over here in America that we need to be selfish right now as America. We need to worry about ourselves. I'm just being honest.
Okay. So what's next? What do you think is next as far as because of course, obviously they saying that the ceasefire is holding up. It hasn't even been 24 hours, but the ceasefire is holding up so far. So you think that
confusion where I guess a rocket got across after the ceasefire and there was a bunch of anger and stuff like that. And Trump was really pissed off this morning because they almost resumed the war. I'll say this, Israel breaks ceasefires all the time. They did it with Lebanon and Hezbollah. They did it with Gaza and Hamas. They should have been they should have been done with the conflict in Gaza, but they pulled out of the ceasefire there because there was a 3-part deal with it that Trump negotiated, but Israel only completed the first part of the deal and then ignored the other ones. That's very important to know that the Israelis typically don't negotiate for ceasefires unless they're losing or they cannot continue the warfare that it is. So the only reason they agreed to this ceasefire is because they knew the longer that the conflict would happen, Iran's missiles will start to pierce more and more into their airspace. And we're talking about the destruction of Tel Aviv and Haifa. So that's why they agreed. But I think that they're going to take this time to rebuild, get more money, replenish, and then start another conflict with Iran. There's no way at this point that they're not going to continue to push for regime change. And I think Iran on their side is going to work even harder and more aggressively to get a nuclear bomb to defend themselves, because it's very obvious now at this point that regardless, they're going to consistently say, you guys have a nuclear bomb. So they might as well get one now to actually deter, because the whole purpose of nuclear weapons isn't actually to destroy other countries. It's to show that you're capable of destroying other countries so they don't destroy you.
Makes sense.
So what the French coach is there to think about?
Makes sense. And we definitely see that, and we, Myron definitely spoke about, what's going on with this situation and things like that, and what, it means to have nuclear capability. And this is where we at right here. So, yeah, it is what it is, man. And yeah, we've seen throughout the times in this country, on this planet, period, a lot of nations do have nuclear power, and we've all heard, like with the Cold War, stuff like that. If you remember those times, stuff, or somewhat remember things like that, it was the nuclear war, the Cold War. It just is what it is. And I definitely agree with Myron on what he said about, having that type of power to deter people from, moving against you. And that's how situations have been working. That's the reason why, North Korea and all that stuff, we never really moved against North Korea, or North Korea never really moved against us. It's the deterrent. And I definitely respect what Myron just said about that situation, because this is the truth right here. It is a deterrent to have nuclear power. And I can see why Iran is in a hurry to actually gain that one nuclear missile, even just that one, will put them in a position to where they can, be on the stage and things like that, and where, they won't get messed with in a certain type of way. So, yeah, but this is wild here, though. And I could definitely see how, I could definitely see how this is not going to really end. But at the same time, though, too, if Iran does actually complete their nuclear situation, then at the same time, though, too, just like with the rest of the countries, nations, whatever, that have nuclear power, yeah, everybody's going to have to keep at bay, and it's going to have to be some serious negotiation going on before anything happens on that type of scale. And, this is just reality here. I could definitely dig that, man. Like, nah, countries are not going to war with other countries that have nuclear power. So they're going to have to figure something else the fuck out. But at this moment right now, Iran don't just have it, or maybe they do. I can dig what Myra was saying too. Maybe they snuck some things out, got some things in another country with, you know, allies and stuff like that. They're also allies with Russia. Who knows? And yeah, who knows at this point, you know, because a lot of things are happening behind the scenes that, you know, the common folk out here, we don't just necessarily know about. But this is the point that Myron actually put in place, and I definitely agree with. If you have nuclear power on this planet, certain negotiations are going to have to be had. Certain movement is going to have to be needed to do. And it's just nowhere around it, because, you know, to have that power and stuff like that. And also too, you know, knowing that the opposition of you has the power as well. Yeah, it's crazy. And if they really want to protect their citizens and try to live a decent life, try to have a decent society for their country, stuff like that, then they're not going to want to push those serious buttons. But it is what it is, though. Shout out to all my subscribers. Mad love to y'all. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like, share, subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell to be notified whenever I decide to post things. And like I always say,
and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
That, my friends, is the bottom line.